Okay, guys, so I just want to do a complete live recording of putting together this one program idea, starting with your most advanced clients, the really strong, the really athletic people that are doing crazy amounts of weight that can work out really hard. So let's just say I have a client, Ben, who benches a ton of weight. He does sets of 5 with 250 pounds. So I'm going to go to the max and rep calculator, and we see his estimated 1 rep max is 280, and his actual training max is going to be that 250 number. So we're going to base all of our percentages for Ben's training off of this. So let's just say I want Ben to do sets of 5. So we're going to see that that is 80% of his estimated training max. So that's 200 pounds. So we're going to come back to the workout program and we're going to fill in 200 because I want him doing sets of 5. And we're just going to do straight sets across. Let's just do 4 sets of 200 straight across. And as always, I love the AMRAP set. So we're just going to do that 5 plus, just to signify he's doing that AMRAP set. Let's fill in the rest 5, 5, just so he knows 4 sets of 5 and then that last set of AMRAP. Now, of course, we don't want him to jump right into sets of 200, having not done anything. We need to get him ready. So we want him to warm up to those weights. And if I'm doing something like 80% for sets of 5, I'll generally do something like 45, 55, 65 for sets of 5. You could certainly do something like 50, 60, 70 for maybe like 5, 3, 1, something like that. But I'll just keep it pretty simple today. Just 45, 55, 65 for sets of 5. So let's just say sets of 5 here. And let's come back and fill in those weights. So 45 would be 115. 55 would be 140. Oops. And 65 would be 165. So that's Ben's warm-up weights for the day. Because again, of course, we don't want him to jump right under 200 pounds. He could possibly get injured. He's just not going to be ready to lift for that day. Now, I'm always going to superset the warm-up exercises with some sort of power exercise. So for Ben, I'm just going to have him do some med ball chest passes because he can bounce back and forth between these two exercises pretty quickly. He's not really going to tire himself out. He's actually going to get nice and warm and ready to go lift his heavy weight. So that's where I'm thinking with this whole process. You could skip the power exercises, of course. That's totally fine. You could fill in some sort of filler exercise like a band pull apart. You could do like a core exercise. I just like the power exercises in general because it's just really good to get the nervous system firing, and it, of course, gets our body warm and ready to lift. Now for week 2 with Ben, I'm going to use that stair step system that I'm such a big fan of. Really love how simplistic it is. So I'm going to start his sets at sets of 3, or excuse me, I'm going to increase one of those sets to 85%. So he's doing those for sets of 3, and then keep the other 3 sets at 5. So we come back over to max and rep and calculator. We see sets of 3 are 85% at 215. So simply just put in set of 3, and then 5, 5, 5 plus, and we have 215, and then 200, 200, 200. So keeping it the same exact thing. Now, this 215 and this 200 number may change. Again, referencing back to the AMRAP target. Say like Ben crushes this set of 5. He gets like a set of 12 or something like that. I could choose to increase his training max here by 5 or 10 or 15, some crazy number if I so choose. But let's just say Ben is a little bit older. He's mid-30s. He's not as young as he used to be. So I'm just going to decide just to keep the training max the same, and I will not change that training max until the following month, for instance. So we're just going to keep it that 215. And then the following week after that is going to be 2 sets of 3, and then 2 sets of 5. Oops, 5 plus. And then this 4th week, you could choose to do a deload if you so choose. I'm just going to assume that Ben's going to take a deload at some point further in the future. Let's just say like 2 more, 3 more training cycles down the road, or excuse me, weeks down the road, not cycles. So we'll do 3 sets across here, and 1 final set of 5 plus for an AMRAP. So it'd be 215, and then let me fill all these in right there. So now I've got Ben's sets and reps filled out for his main focus lift for the entire month. And let's make sure we actually get it in for the warm-up sets as well. Now the warm-up sets here, I may actually change a little bit because we're starting off with that set of 3. You could, as I discussed in my video before, I personally like to do a set of 5 and then down to a set of 3, or excuse me, up to a set of 3 and then back down to a set of 5. Either way, it doesn't really matter. This way is good because you get that post-activation potentiation where you're lifting a little bit heavier, so you're actually making the sets of 5 feel very light. You could also stair step it, as I said in the other video, where you start at 5 and you build up to that 3 and then back down to the 5. Either way, it's going to work just fine. But in this example, let's just say we are going to start with that set of 3. So I would want to bump his warm-up sets a little bit. And actually what I'd probably do in this case would just increase or have one more sets close to that 85%. So let's just say we'll do a set of 75 at just, let's do a set of 80% at a single. So he's just really ready to lift that weight. You know, like mentally he knows how heavy it's going to be. So we're going to say 80% is 200 pounds. We know that from below. But we're just going to do that for a set of 1. Just to kind of get mentally prepped to lift that really heavy weights. So we'll fill that in. And I would just keep the chest passes at 3 sets. You could do a 4 set if you really want to, but I think at that point you're going to start tiring things out when we're looking just to warm up. Another thing, as I discussed briefly too, you could just drop this down to a set of 3, for instance. Not completely necessary, but just something to kind of be aware of. Again, this is really going to depend on people's age. And, you know, as I said, Ben's mid-30s. He's not super old, so it's fine with doing sets of 5 for him and then just doing that one top-heavy set. So now we've got the main lift completely out of the way. So let's get our superset exercise and that. And I've used band pull-aparts and face pull. I use them all the time. I think they're a great upper back superset for benching because it keeps your upper back nice and healthy, nice and strong, keeps your shoulders nice and healthy, nice and strong, gets them really warm and ready to lift. So any of those exercises, face pulls, band pull-aparts, I'm just going to do a bent over rear delt fly. Just give another example of what we can do. And reps, I'll keep somewhere in like the 6 to 10 kind of range because this is not going to be a very heavy weight. But again, we don't want to get like super tired or anything like that. It's more just a kind of an activation kind of exercise here. And this is going to be kind of up to Ben to choose the weights. You know, I'll recommend something super light. I'll recommend something as light as 5 pounds. And, you know, if he feels like that is just way too light, it's not even doing anything at all, you know, he could bump it up to like 7.5 if he's got those, or possibly 10s. But I'm going to stress to him that, you know, he's not really feeling tired from this. He's, you know, he's working a little bit, but he does not want to get tired for this. It's just an active rest in between his heavy bench sets. Now, as far as rest, I will generally prescribe rest at this point for someone this advanced because he's lifting pretty heavy weights, right? So we want to make sure he's resting. So something like upper body, I generally want 2 to 3 minutes total rest in between the sets. So I'll generally recommend a 2-minute weights here at least, up to even that 3-minute weight, just depending on, again, how heavy they are, their training age. Again, Ben's a little bit older, so I'll generally recommend about 180 seconds after his rear delt flies, because this is only going to take a couple seconds. I want him to rest that full 3 minutes after those, so he's really ready and set to go for that for each subsequent set, especially for those AMRAP sets where we're trying to push things a little bit harder there. You could increase to 4 or 5 minutes if you so choose. I don't really think that's worthwhile for most people unless they're really pursuing heavy strength training. Like if you got power lifters or people who are just overly concerned, I don't want to say overly is a bad thing, but who are just primarily concerned with building their top end strength, resting up to 5 minutes really is generally recommended because you're fully prepped and ready to go. I personally like something in that 2 to 4 range, depending if it's upper body or lower body, because you are still getting stronger, but you are also training a bit of your conditioning system. After that, we're going to move into our main superset that supports that primary lift. So we've got a horizontal push and we've got our horizontal row. Big, heavy movements are what you need here. It doesn't really matter too much what you're choosing here, but you want something that is heavy. So dumbbells, alternate barbell exercises, those are going to be perfect here. So we're doing a horizontal day. So I'm going to stick with a barbell exercise. I'm going to stick with an incline barbell bench press. You could certainly do like a dumbbell bench press, a dumbbell incline bench press, a dumbbell a barbell decline. All sorts of variations you can use here. And he's lifting in this 3 to 5 range, and we don't necessarily want to go as low as 3s, especially for our secondary exercises, but something like a 4 to 6, 5 to 8 kind of range will be a good range here because it's pretty supportive of what he's trying to do with this main lift here. And it's not so heavy that we're really, going to crush ourselves too hard because we don't want to lift like super heavy after lifting super heavy, if that makes sense. So I'll do something like a 4 to 6 here. And I'll make sure that he understands that it's going to be a little bit lighter. He should feel like he could do 8-ish, 9-ish reps if he's doing if he's doing 6 reps. He should feel like he could do 8, maybe 9. If he's only doing 4 reps, he should feel like he should be able to do 6 or 7. Same thing with this horizontal row. I'm going to say T-bar row. And again, bent over rows would be good here. Dumbbell rows would be a really good thing here. Something super heavy that you can load the crap out of. And generally for something like a T-bar row, since it's not quite the same, I will go a little bit higher on these. So I'll do like a 5 to 8 for this. If you want to do barbell row for 4 to 6, totally fine. Dumbbell rows, same idea. 4 to 6 would totally be fine. If you want to bump it up to maybe like a 5 to 10, that'd totally be fine too. You got a lot of wiggle room here. But again, you're trying to mimic a little bit this main movement, but it does not have to be a perfect replication of the reps of that main lift. As I discussed before too, I'm going to give him this rep range. He'll generally pick a pretty good weight for himself. Maybe week 1, he may go a little bit too light, or he may go a little bit too heavy on the incline bench or the T-bar rows, but someone this advanced, they're going to have a pretty good intrinsic idea of where they need to be. And they'll be able to dial in pretty quickly. Usually by like set 2 or set 3 of week 1, they're going to know about what they need to be doing. Certainly by week 2, they'll know exactly where they need to be. So rep ranges, I think, really are the best thing to recommend when it comes to the secondary lifts and the tertiary lifts after that. Especially for your more advanced clients, they know pretty much where they need to be. You just need to give them a little bit of guidance, a little bit of direction, and they'll fill in the details from there. So I'll let him fill that in from there. Let's just say he does like, I don't know, 145, on that first set, and it feels pretty good. So he's been doing those. Same thing, T-bar rows. Let's just say he does like, I don't know, 90 pounds. And those feel pretty good. So not really going to worry too much about that. Just want to make sure that he has that rep range, that he has that RPE scale, so he understands about where he needs to be. Again, if he's doing 6 reps, he should feel he should be able to do about 8, maybe even 9. If he's only doing 4 reps, he should feel that he should be able to do 6, maybe even 7 reps. And then finishing off with these accessory exercises, we got the push, the pull, core rear accessory. You can leave this out completely if you want to. I'm actually, since this is pretty heavy, I will do a secondary pull exercise. Thinking to myself, just an upper back accessory exercise just to keep my upper back healthy, keep shoulders healthy. So I'll do, let's just call this a rear delt. Cable crossover. Just to hit that upper back rear delts a little bit more, get a little bit more hypertrophy there, a little bit more strength there. And reps, I'll keep these pretty high, 12 to 20 kind of range. Just get a lot of blood flow in that area. For the pull, since we did a T-bar row, I'm going to go with the cable variation here. So we'll do a seated cable. You could certainly do a vertical pull if you wanted to. I just like keeping horizontal with horizontal and vertical. Vertical is very simple and very easy to track. Reps, I'll keep in that 8 to 12 range, so it's a little bit heavy, but not something crazy. And push, let's go weighted push-ups. Again, this is wide open for so many things. You could do a close grip barbell bench if you really wanted to, if they felt fine. They had no real shoulder issues or anything like that. That'd totally be a fine choice as well. And same thing with here. I'm going to do that 8 to 12 with these weighted push-ups. So right there, we've got our program done. We've got pretty much the biggest challenge for us for this month. If we're planning out by month, we've got pretty much the biggest challenge out of the way because we've laid out our program, how we want it to lay out. And we've put in, everything we wanted to put in for this person. And this is kind of going to be the main blueprint for the rest of our workouts for our other clients. So say we've got an intermediate client. They're pretty strong, but they're not really like crazy strong like our previous client was. They're moving into the later intermediate phase of their training. They're pretty strong. They're in pretty good shape, but they're really not quite at the point that you really need to start using percentages for them. You could certainly use percentages as I discussed, but we're really not at that point where they need to do that. So we're going to model the same exact workout. And what I mean is we're going to keep those med ball throws for 3 sets of 5, 3 times 5. And then we're going to have the bench press, barbell bench press, of course. Now, this is going to be a little bit different. You could certainly prescribe some weights to this person, and that's really going to be kind of dictated on a lot of things. Again, really training, so many things, right? But here, so the idea, what I'm doing here with this intermediate client is I'm going to have them work up to a heavy set of 5, as I discussed in the programming options. So I'm going to have them work up to what feels like a pretty heavy set of 5, thinking that they can maybe get 6, maybe 7 if they really had to eke one last rep out. So I want them to work up to that weight. So they're going to feel out what that set of 5 feels out after 4 sets. So their warm-up sets, I'm going to let them dictate that themselves. I can give them some guidance, certainly. And let's say I think this person might work up to maybe like, let's say 175. So I could say something like, you probably do like 95 and then, 135 and then like 155, something like that. And then go for 5 at 175. If they think about that's what they're going to work up to. Or you just tell them, work up to something that feels pretty heavy set of 5 in 4 sets. And again, most clients at this later intermediate stage, they're going to kind of know about where they need to be when it comes to that weight. So I'm going to let them fill in their warm-up sets, especially for week 1, because I could certainly, again, as discussed, fill this stuff in, but I want them to start feeling this stuff out and start trusting themselves and really building the confidence that they know about where they need to be. So let's just say they do work up to that set of 5 at 175. It was pretty heavy, but it felt pretty good. So now I'm going to have them drop back 10% and continue with sets of 5 across. So 10% of 175 would be 17.5, which would bring you down to, I can't do this math. Hold on one sec. So now they've worked up to that 175 is pretty good set of 5. Is pretty heavy, but not so crazy that they're grinding, getting the struggle to get that last rep in. They got 5. They felt like they could have definitely did 6, maybe 7 if they really had to. So now I want them to drop back about 10% and just do sets of 5 across. So 10% of 175 is 17.5. And so that brings you down to 157.5. And you could really go either way with this. If you want to err on the side of caution, you can tell them just to do 155. Or if you want to push them a little bit, you could do 160. 2.5 pounds either direction, 5 pounds either direction, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. You could really leave it up to yourself, leave it up to the client what they think would be best for them to do for sets across at this weight. But either way, it's going to be fine because they hit 175 for fairly easy, or not easy, but a heavy set of 5, but not something crazy. So they should be able to do 155 or 160, no problems at all. So let's just say they decide to go a little bit heavier this week and they do 160 for sets across. And let's make sure we fill in the reps of 5 so everybody knows that they're doing sets of 5. And for this person, this later intermediate phase, I'm pretty much just going to keep them at those sets of 5 across for the entire cycle here. What I'm going to do is to say, okay, next week we're going to work up to 180 for a set of 5. And then the following week, 185. And the week after that, 190. And then take, again, 10% off of each one of those again. The other way that you could go with this, just again, depending on a client's training age and their levels, instead of dropping that straight 10% off of the 180, for instance, you could say, okay, you did 160 last week, let's do 165 this week. So that is another kind of option. Again, this really is going to depend on the client in front of you. If they're pretty young, they're pretty strong, they want to get stronger, they're pretty, they're in a really good level of training, then you can push them a little bit, say 165, and then the following week be 170, and the following week after that 175. It's not going to be as perfect and linear as that. You may have to kind of go back and forth. You might say, well, it's 165 this week, and then by that last set, that 165 really heavy. So you're like, okay, we're not going to increase by 5 pounds. Next week we'll keep it at 165 level. Or again, you could just knock that 10% off of the 180. So 180, obviously 10% of that is 18, and subtract that would be I'm doing math again, 162, which again, you could go that 160 route if you want to be a little bit more conservative, or push it up to that 165 level again if you want to push things a little bit. So it's going to be dependent on the client in front of you. And if you get it wrong, that's totally fine. You can always back off the weight too. It's totally not a big deal here. Another pretty similar option that would kind of mirror that most advanced client over here would be, you could do something like work up to a top set of 5, back off 10%. On week 1, work up to a top set of 4, back off 10% week 2, work up to a set of 3, back off 10%, work up set of 2, or 2. I can fill this in, and so on and so forth from there. So they work up to 175 on week 1, they work up to 180. It could be something as simple as they do this, and you could prescribe that depending on what they hit on week 1, or you could have them, feel it out themselves and then just adjust from there kind of accordingly. So as I discussed, I said plenty of times, programming is very flexible. There's tons of ways to do this programming, and all of them will work as long as you have some sort of sound progression scheme. And what I mean is, like, you're not just going to tell someone just to add a bunch of weight for no reason. You have kind of a thought process behind each kind of reasoning. But after that, we've already got the workout decided. The rest of the workout's already decided. So we offer back. We're going to do that. There we go. I can scroll over. Bent over rear delt fly. For upper back. Oop. Let's there we go. Bent over delta fly. We've got the incline bench, T-bar row. Actually, I'll just copy and paste this whole thing here. Makes it much easier. So we've already got the workout decided. Man, I don't know what happened here. Guess some copy and paste there. And then, of course, you could individualize further from here. So let's just say that you don't think T-bar row makes sense for him. You're going to have him do an incline one-arm dumbbell row. Right? Same thing, weighted push-ups. Maybe they're not at weighted push-ups yet. Or maybe they're not at weighted push-ups for 8 to 12. Maybe they're at weighted push-ups for like 4 to 8, right? So you can still customize and individualize from here. So again, I just want to stress that this is not a cookie cutter approach. This is creating a program that you are super excited about, that you're super happy about, that you want to give to your craziest client, your best client, your strongest client. And then you just change things, regress things, or even progress things depending on the client as needed for the other clients that you are training. So now I want to examine a new relatively newer intermediate client, if that makes sense, someone who's not crazy strong yet, but they're getting into barbells, and we want to treat them pretty much the same. We're just going to tweak a little bit further from here, but we're going to keep the med ball throws the same. 3x5. Now, for someone at this level, let's say they're brand new to training with the barbell. They don't really need as much warm-up time under the bar to get where they need to be. So we just can do 2 sets here. And for someone like this, just getting into the barbells, I'm going to stick with that 8 to 12 range because they're pretty comfortable with that. They feel pretty good about that range, and it's not really going to be overwhelming for them. So let's just say we're going to do like 8 reps until it feels pretty heavy, right? And then reps here, we're going to keep that 8 to 12. In all honesty, I'd probably just say 8 to 12 up here as well. So let's just make that 8 to 12. And again, this client is going to kind of have to feel things out, as clients do. You're going to give them that little bit of a target, some direction, and they're going to fill in the details from there. Likewise, for this client, they don't really need as much volume to make progress as our later intermediate and our more advanced clients. So I'd probably stick with just 3 sets here. And then maybe I'd bump up 3 to 4 and then 4 for that final week. So I'll give them a little bit more advanced progression scheme to reflect their a little bit more advanced status, but they don't need too much difference here, and they don't need as much volume needed to create some change. Again, they do need a little bit more, and we are getting a little bit more focus, but they don't need as much as someone who's a little bit more advanced. Now, again, your work here is pretty much done for this client because they're going to kind of feel things out for themselves, especially with these warm-up sets. And you could even prescribe a third warm-up set. That'd be totally fine. But they're going to have to feel things out and understand kind of where they need to be without you having to prescribe it for them, because that's not what we should be doing as coaches. We need to kind of, again, just give them the direction while they fill in the details from there. So from here, everything else pretty much the same. We can tweak things as needed. And let's just say we do need to tweak some things for this client. So I'll do that right now. I messed that up. Wrong copy and paste. Here we go. And let's just say that this client, the bend over rear delt fly, just doesn't work for them. They're not quite hinging right when they do it. They're not really feeling their upper back doing it. So let's just say they need to do a face pull instead. Face pull. And I'd probably just up this to 8 to 12 for them as well. Or maybe even 10 to 15, that's totally fine too. Rest, I'm probably not going to prescribe too much rest for them because, again, they're newer to this lifting. They don't need as much rest. They're not really outstripping their ability to recover in between sets when they go for their strength training. I will start telling them at this point that they do need to rest longer, and that's why the workout has changed. The workout structure has changed a little bit. But again, it's not something I'm going to really superly worry too much about at this point for this person who's newly into this intermediate phase. And I did forget to address that with the intermediate client. It's probably be about the same, honestly, because they're a stronger intermediate client. I'd probably just do like 120 to 180 as opposed to the 180 for the advanced client. So I'd give them 120 to 180 here. For the newer client, or the newer intermediate rather client, I'd probably just say, something like 60 to 120 seconds. And that wouldn't, again, I wouldn't be stressed too much about it if they went a little too early at this point, because their strength really isn't that high where they need that much rest. But it is a good practice to get them in that mindset that they are going to have to start resting longer. Let's just say incline bench press, they, maybe their shoulder can't handle two barbell exercises back to back. So we're just going to dumbbell bench press here. And we do not want to do 4 to 6 for a dumbbell bench press because that is a little too heavy for any sort of dumbbell exercises. And also, too, this person has been just doing sets 8 to 12. So we can say something like 8 to 12. You could say 6 to 10. You can say 10 to 15, somewhere in that kind of relatively higher rep range. We'll say T-bar rows, same thing. Totally fine here. Weighted push-ups, they're not at weighted push-ups yet. They're just at push-ups. Oops, I had my caps lock on. Seated cable row is totally fine for them. Rear delt cable crossover. Let's just say they're not, again, rear delt exercise, that specific rear delt kind of exercise not really working for them. So we could swap this out for a face pull. Let's just say they actually just want to work on their biceps a little bit more. They just want to blow them up a little bit. So we can put some bicep curls in there for that client. So again, same workout, almost the same at this point. Just tweak down for now this intermediate client who is not quite as strong as the advanced intermediate or not as strong as the advanced client using percentages. But now let's say we've got an intermediate client who can't do upper lower splits. We're not having to do upper lower splits. They're just doing full body training 3 or 4 times per week for whatever reason. Well, then we have to do a little bit of work, but then we can just come over to our blueprint here, and we've got the bench press focus, quote unquote, day. So we just copy and paste this one. Into here, and let's just scroll down. And now we've got that full body blueprint that the client is going to follow. So we just want to come right back up here. So we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to med ball throws. Here my 5 bench. Again, we could do 2 sets, 3 sets. Let's just say they just need the 2 sets. We'll just copy and paste. And actually, we'll change things a little bit for this intermediate client who's maybe a little bit more advanced, but they're doing full body workouts. So rather than an 8 to 12, we're going to have them do a 5 to 8 kind of rep range. Reflect that we want to train them a little bit heavier and reflect their status that they're a little bit more advanced. So someone here I'd probably do 3 sets with. Let's see if this fill will work. Okay, great, it worked that time. But again, here, going to let them paint in the numbers and the weights as they need to. And then same idea here. Let's just say they do need that 4th set. They are a little bit more advanced, so we're going to give them the 5 to 8, but we're going to do 4 sets. But again, they're going to fill in these numbers here. And let's just say they're a little bit more, a little bit younger. We're not really concerned with getting their upper back super strong to kind of counteract any aging, bent over the desk kind of worries. So let's say we're going to do some core work, direct core work with this person, because that's something they really want to do. And I don't want to write in core. Say they're going to do a weighted plank. And we'll do 4 sets of that. And obviously you can't do the reps. You're going to do time. Let's just say we want to do 30 seconds. Something pretty heavy. Not super heavy, but pretty heavy. Didn't do it that time. And for someone like this, especially that they're doing a relatively heavier, not crazy heavy, but weighted plank. So we're definitely going to prescribe that rest of 120, maybe even up to 180, depending on how heavy they're going, how tired they are. And honestly, I did make a mistake here because I have the heavy core in B2. So weighted plank probably would be too heavy to double up both a weighted plank and a heavy core. But let's just do that. We'll move the weighted plank down to heavy core. And we'll keep that same 30 seconds. Keep sets at 3. And then we'll adjust weighted plank to something else. We could do dead bug, relatively lighter exercise. I feel like I just use those all the time. I use those all the time as an example. So let's go to hollow rock. So again, relatively lighter, it's body weight. And we can make this a little bit, 30 seconds, probably fine for a person at this level. You could drop it down to maybe even just 20 seconds. You can have them do a easier variation. So hollow rock with knees bent for 30 seconds. That'd be a great fill-in exercise there, and it hits that direct core that that client is specifically looking for. After that, we can do a heavy secondary knee or hip dominant exercise, be it a lunge, Romanian deadlift, single leg deadlift. So I'm going to go with an assisted, hand assisted on the wall, single leg deadlift, but weighted. And I like this exercise because you can load the crap out of it, and the assistance of having your hand on a wall really lets you target your glutes and hamstrings, and clients will hate you and both love you for using this exercise. So we're going to do 3 sets. And again, we're going a little bit heavier, the 5 to 8, so I'm going to do a little bit heavier with the 6 to 10 on these. Oh my God, I can't copy and paste. You'll find copying and pasting to be a bane of your existence as well. And we've already filled in that weighted plank. And we've got a knee or hip dominant here. So obviously we did a hip dominant, so we can do a knee dominant here. So we can choose something like a lunge. We can do a split squat. We're going to do a split squat. ISO hold. As I discussed before, with tempo and things like that, you can change tempo and a little bit for your more advanced clients. And ISO hold to split squats are both a great exercise from a health standpoint. Also, it feels really hard, and a lot of clients do kind of like that feeling of hard work. And also, it is kind of nice because you don't really have to weight this at all, or if you do, it's very light. So it's not putting a whole lot more stress on top of stress that the client is already dealing with all the other exercises. So again, we'll do 3 sets here. And let's say they're shooting for 20 seconds. I put a tilde as just a roughly 20 seconds. You know, if they feel if it's too much, they can do 15. If they feel like they go longer, they can do 30. Don't know what happened there. Same thing. Again, cutting and pasting, always a problem. And then we've got the pull, so we can just use one of the pulls that we've put in above. So it could be that T-bar row that we had with the original client. It could be that incline, one arm incline DB row that we had for the change up for that specific client. You could put in some other pull. There's no real need to change what you've already established with the other clients though. So we could put in T-bar rows here. And again, 6 to 10, relatively higher, reflective of what the rest of the workout is, but not crazy high, right? And again, this core weird accessory or empty, you could fill in something that we have from above. So scrolling up, we did use the bicep curls as an accessory exercise for that one client, for one of the intermediate clients. We could scroll even further, and there are we have the rear delt cable crossover. That could be another option, and that might even be a really good option since we did quote unquote skip the upper back health exercise for the filler exercise. But again, we're not overly concerned with this client and their upper back. They're still relatively younger. They haven't really been hunched over a desk or a car for as long. So again, it's not a huge worry. So we're going to say bicep curls for this client. And of course, we could have left this blank. That'd be totally fine too, depending on their levels, what we think they can handle. Bicep curls, I generally won't do something like 6 to 10. It's totally fine, but generally I'll keep that in the 8 to 8 plus kind of range. And I give them a relatively larger target, just kind of get more of their pump on from there. So regressing things from there to our average newish clients, we can just pretty much copy and paste this, and then we're going to again adjust it as needed. And one thing to note too, I did for power, I had them do the med ball throws into the bench as the kind of bouncing back and forth. You could certainly with this client have them do med ball throws and some box jumps because they are doing a full body they are doing a full body workout exercise. That'd totally be a fine option too. And that's actually what we're going to do with our new average client because we want them to kind of get their heart rate up, get their sweat on, get their circuit training on, and increase their strength all at the same time. So we're not going to have the warm-up exercises for this client because they don't really need it, to be completely honest with you. You could certainly, if they are lifting a little bit more weights, say they're starting to lift, 50, 60, 70 plus pound dumbbells for bench press or something like that, you could certainly have them start warming up to those as well. And that didn't work, delete. So we'll say med ball and box jumps. Box jumps. 3x5. Make these rows. This is why I tell you guys, just get an app. Dealing with this stuff, this copy and pasting, as you can see, is always a problem. But anyway, so let's just say we have our newer client, dumbbell bench press. They're not at the point where they need to use bench press, or excuse me, barbells. They don't really want to use barbells. They might at some point, maybe if they want to progress into that. But the idea of barbells maybe is still a little intimidating to them, or they just don't really need it at this point. So again, probably won't do 4 sets for this person. 3 sets, totally fine. Again, 5 to 8, probably not necessary at all for this client. So 8 to 12 is going to be totally fine for them. And then pretty much we have the same workout for this person. We're going to adjust some things as needed for them. They're not resting here. And we're going to do those 2 trisets. Let's delete this. And we'll just double check we have everything. So we've got dumbbell bench, which is push. We've got our core. We've got our hip dominant. And then we've got our core. We've got our knee dominant. And we've got our pull. So we've already got that pre-filled out. But again, we want to adjust for that person in front of us. So assisted single leg deadlift could be fine for this person. But what I find with most newer clients is, single leg is not completely necessary for this person at this point. We want them to get stronger. They don't really need to start doing single leg. And I'm not saying don't do single leg work or single arm work with new clients. I'm just saying they just need to get stronger. So something like single leg, there's going to be a challenge on their conditioning system because they're essentially doing double the work. So I would just do an RDL, Romanian deadlift dumbbells, with this person. Again, I'm not saying don't do single leg work with this client. I'm just showing kind of demonstratively that you can quickly change things for the person in front of you. Obviously, they're definitely not going to do a weighted plank. They're newer. I mean, maybe they are doing weighted plank because they're pretty strong. But let's assume they're a newer client again, newer to average client. We're just going to stick with plank. So split squat iso hold, again, probably would not be doing something like an iso hold with a newer client. You certainly could, and this is a single leg exercise, so I'm kind of contradicting myself here, but again, just mostly for demonstrative purposes, right? So split squat iso hold, not something I'd probably do for this person. I'd probably just do a split squat, honestly, because they need a little bit more of a training effect. Like an iso hold is a good training effect, but the idea of choosing it before for the previous client was they're a pretty strong person. We want to deload them a little bit without, we want them to give a workout without having to necessarily load everything all the time, because they are doing some pretty heavy bench pressing and some pretty heavy work throughout the rest of the week. Whereas this client, full body, we're really more concerned with their consistency, getting them in, getting them a little bit stronger. And again, a split squat iso hold is not really giving that strength kind of adaptation that we're really looking for. So 8 to 12 here. And, the weights are going to be kind of what the client kind of feels out here. And T-bar rows, this would be a fine option. You could do the seated cable rows that we had for the other client. You could do the dumbbell rows for the other client, or excuse me, that the other client had. Let's just assume that T-bar rows aren't something that we want them to do, so we'll have them do seated cable row. That's good, row. Or maybe, you don't have the access to the cable machines, because you're trying to do a circuit of exercises, so you just do a dumbbell row. Totally fine option from there. So now finally, we're at that detrained, maybe older client. Maybe they're just extremely overweight. Whatever kind of situation they have, they're just very regressed. We have to regress things a lot more. So at this point, we can copy and paste this workout, because we want them to be training full body because they're detrained. We just need to give them a lot of exposure to a lot of things over the week. And as I said before, anybody could do med ball throws, so that would be totally fine. Now, box jumps, let's just say maybe it's not a good choice. They're really overweight. Jumping is not an option for this person. Or maybe, again, they're older, so jumping really isn't too much of an option for them. So this could really go a couple different directions. I'm going to default to, so if someone's overweight, I'm going to default to some sort of active core exercise. Could be a farmer carry. Farmer carry for like 20 yards. You could do like a Palloff press. Again, if someone's overweight, I don't want them to have to get up and get down from the floor. So I'm not going to do a lot of floor core exercises like a plank or a side plank or something like that. So farmer carry is a good option because they can just remain standing. They don't have to get up and get down. Same thing for someone who's older, getting up and getting down. It's really hard for them. If they're just new to training and they just have never really trained before in their life and they're an otherwise relatively average person, a plank here would be a totally fine option. And immediately what I want to do is change their sets and reps to what I had before. Because again, we want them to have a relatively easier time. We want them to not feel overwhelmed right away. And honestly, for just depending on how quote unquote banged up a person is, I'd put 2 to 3 here. And then finish with 3 for 10 to 15 or 12 to 15 here. Let's change that for each one. Oh, I'll change that stuff there. And change this. Likewise, for power, I'd probably only do 2 sets. Because again, with new clients, with detrained clients, they don't need that much to have changes happen to them. They don't really need to get crazy advanced. They don't need a whole lot of volume for them to start seeing changes happen, for them to get stronger. Whereas the most advanced clients, they need a lot of specific things to help these adaptations keep going. As we regress our clients, we can certainly regress the workouts and make them super easy, and they're going to be incredibly effective for this person regardless. So again, so let's just say dumbbell bench press, or excuse me, getting up and getting down. They're overweight, maybe a little bit older. Dumbbell bench press, I think would be totally fine. It's totally fine option. It's not super threatening. But what another idea you can do when it comes to pressing would be an incline dumbbell bench press, because that incline is just slightly less difficult for that person to lay down on and then get back up off of, if that makes sense. So that'd be a good option. You could certainly do a high incline push-up on, like you said, a barbell and a high set of pins. That'd be a really good option for that person as well, something like that. Hollow rock, we are certainly not doing that with this person, so I want them to remain standing. So I'm going to keep Palloff press. I think that's one of the single best exercises you can do. You know what? Let's say I'll give you guys another option: transverse chop. There we go. So that is, as opposed to a half kneeling chop or a half kneeling lift, this would be a lateral chop transfer. So you're kind of rotating sideways through that. It's a good option for a lot of clients, and we can do that same kind of rep scheme for here. RDLs, this is kind of one of those things that really could go a lot of different directions. Hinging is a very important lesson that a lot of clients need to learn. And the question becomes, when do they need to learn it, kind of thing. For this person that needs to, or excuse me, it's really hard getting up and getting down for them, I'd probably opt for something like a dumbbell RDL, or probably even a cable pull through. Or I could possibly just give them a PVC pipe and then have them hinge. You can also opt for something like a goblet hold good morning, relatively low level, unthreatening exercise to, again, teach them the hip. But these would be the 2 options I'd choose for this kind of person. Again, if they're that more average person that's just really out of shape, otherwise they're relatively healthy person, I'd give them something like a glute bridge or a feet elevated glute bridge. Because they're going to get a little bit more of a training effect out of that. They're going to get a little bit stronger, and we don't really have to worry about, trying to teach them how to hinge, because we know as trainers that is one of the toughest lessons we can teach our clients. Plank for this person, totally fine, but I probably opt for just a hands elevated at this point. Get them a little bit higher. In 30 seconds, whatever, it could be as low as 15 seconds for the client, could be as high as like, a minute if they're at that level. Split squat, again, for this kind of client, probably not going to offer a split squat. So could do something like a TRX assisted split squat where they're using their arms and legs to perform the movement. Again, a lot of different directions you could go in this. For someone who's a little bit overweight, or just really untrained, I generally won't opt for a single leg exercise like this right off the bat for them, because it is going to be really hard. As I said, the conditioning challenge is higher because you're essentially doing twice the work as a double leg exercise. There are really a couple different directions. I mean, like I've covered plate extended goblet squats as an option. We've got the TRX assisted squat as an option. If you chose a TRX assisted split squat, it would not be terrible, and it would be a totally fine choice. But of course, this rep range would probably be far too high for them. So I'd probably opt for something like a 5 to 8 for them, because they can go as low as like 10 total reps, right? Or as high as 16. So it's relatively reflective of 10 to 15. You're doing 10 to 16 essentially reps. So that's kind of the direction I would think of that. Obviously, again, you could do plate extended squat. I think they're a really good option. You could push the sled. That is a great option. It's very unthreatening. You can load it as heavy as possible or as really as light as possible for them. So that's a really good choice as well. And dumbbell row, I think this would be a fine exercise to choose for this client. Again, of course, we know they're going to look terrible. Their back's going to be hunched over. They're going to be using their bicep to do the exercise, not their back. But it is a totally fine exercise because it's a good teaching time for them to learn this stuff. I probably would opt for maybe an incline for this person. Again, because it's a little less threatening. They don't have to go down as low. And when you put someone on an incline when they're rowing, they tend to have a little bit better back position where they're not hunched over, just because that incline gives a little bit more support and they feel a little bit more comfortable remaining with a relatively neutral back. So I know that was a crazy long video, and I think there's a few edits I need to make in this video before uploading it. And we can see that the total time here was 46 minutes. And this is 46 minutes of me talking through every single choice that I made. So you as a coach doing this, once you get the hang of this, once you start doing this more and more, this will literally be like minutes at a time. You could do this depending on how many clients you have. You could do it as little as 5 minutes, but probably not doing it as 5 minutes. But definitely in that 30-minute range, you can have multiple workouts for multiple different clients. And you know that these clients are getting exactly what they need. So just to stress it one more time, you're not creating one cookie cutter program and just handing it out to people. What you're doing is creating one program and then individualizing it and customizing it for each person.